and what exactly is due. So for most private and out-of-state schools, they are using a portal called the Common Application. There are over 400 colleges and universities that use this application, including out-of-state and private schools. So the UCs, the CSUs, California Community Colleges do not use this program. If students have not already, they still have plenty of time to create their Common Application account. They'll load all of their school information. They'll complete their portion of the application through this website, and then their recommenders will use it as well. So I mentioned that things vary between schools, including minimum GPA requirements and subject requirements. The nice thing about the A through G requirements, and specifically the CUHSD graduation requirements, is that if students are completing those with C's or better, they likely will be at least at the minimum GPA and subject requirement or above it. For example, the UCs and CSUs require 2 years of science. They recommend 3. CUHSD requires 3 years of science for graduation. Many out-of-state schools will also require 3 years of science. So that puts students in a great position since they are already meeting those as part of earning their diploma through CUHSD. SAT and ACT test requirements also vary. You'll see a couple of options here depending on the school. Test blind means that the school will not consider test scores at all. Even if students try to send them, they will not use them in admissions purposes at all. Some schools are test optional, which means that if a student chooses to take the ACT or SAT and they're able to, they can submit those scores, but it is not a requirement and it will not hurt them in the application process if they don't submit them. It will only help them in that process. Some schools will only use them for math and English placement after admission. So this means that they will not use them in the admissions process. But if a student is accepted to that college or university and they plan to attend, then they can submit those scores for placement into their freshman level math and English courses. So it can help them in that sense as well, but it will not be required for the admissions process. When it comes to the essays and supplemental essays, I'll go into that in more detail in just a moment. But this is where students can sometimes have a hard time because they're talking about themselves and their experience. And it sometimes can feel weird because they're trying to put their best foot forward. They're trying to share all the things that they've done throughout high school. And there's quite a bit. So we've got some resources to help them to do that. Common App has a set of essays that are required, and then individual colleges or universities may have supplemental essays, which they may ask for depending on the major that a student selects, depending on the college or university. If it's something specific, say maybe to Stanford University, they have specific questions related to their college that they want to see students answer. Letters of recommendation generally are required for all Common App schools. Some may say that letters of recommendation are optional, but I tell students, if you have the option to submit things on your behalf, submit them. They have a variance in terms of the number of letters of recommendation. I have seen schools that require 1 letter, but will accept up to 3. Some schools require 2 letters. It just depends on the school. As many as they will accept, send them all. Teachers have there's a set limit for the number of teacher recommendations that students are allowed to submit. Counselors do not count towards that limit. So we have a separate process for our letters of recommendation. I know I've had a couple of students ask already. Now is definitely the time to get that conversation going. This is one of our favorite parts of going through senior year, is writing these recommendations for students. The applications, the deadlines also vary. And this can be tough depending on the school that students are looking at. We'll talk about early action versus early decision in just a moment. You'll notice that those deadlines are much sooner. That also allows students to receive their notification of admission sooner as well. So this can help for their planning process. Regular admission generally starts in January and runs through the middle of February, depending on the school. But we want to make sure that students verify those dates. Whatever those admissions dates are, their application must be submitted. Letters of recommendation, school reports, things that their recommenders, such as teachers or myself, will submit. We will also do those by the deadline. The student's information is the most important. So making sure that they hit those deadlines is the most important thing that they'll need to do. So when it comes to early action versus early decision, there are different outcomes for these. Early decision is binding. So this means that if a student is accepted, applies to early decision and is accepted, they are committing 100% that they will attend. They're able to apply to other colleges and universities in case they're not accepted at that early decision school. But if they are admitted, they're telling that college or institution, I will guarantee to attend your school if I am accepted. This could be helpful if a student has done a lot of research. They are very sure that they want to attend this college or university. They're either at or exceeding the minimum application requirements. So they feel a high likelihood that they'll be able to get accepted, and they are for sure to commit. In some of the workshops that I've been to with different college representatives, they talk to each other. They don't have access to each other's information in terms of, who's applying to which school, but if they know or find out that a student has applied early decision and accepted an offer somewhere else, that can really hurt them in the college admissions process. So sometimes students, will just want to get that information as soon as possible. And they're like, yes, I'll go, without giving themselves the time to do that research. There is some work to do it, but it's very well worth it. Early action is non-binding. So this means that if a student is admitted through the early action process, they do not have to attend that college or university. It can be helpful because it gives them the opportunity to know in advance. Now they can compare financial aid awards. So the school that admitted them early action will also submit their financial aid offer at that time. So as students get acceptances from other colleges or universities, they can compare them against each other. They have all the way through May 1st to submit their what's called statement of intent to register. So that tells the final college or university, yes, I am planning to attend your school, but early action gives them that information up front, but also gives them time to compare against other schools and see where they would like to commit. So there definitely are benefits. There are some drawbacks. It depends on each student's individual situation. Definitely on the benefit side, it can reduce the stress by getting that information sooner. Generally, in the early process, students will be notified by December 15th. So that is well in advance of a lot of admissions decisions that sometimes are coming in February, March, even April, which can kind of delay having everything settled and knowing what they're doing next. It saves them time and expense. Every application that students submit, they have to pay for unless they're granted a fee waiver. So it can definitely save time on the application side of how many they're filling out, how many essays they're doing, and how much money is being spent on the applications. It also gives them time to settle their housing, to get any other, transportation, to do any other process that students need to complete in order to have that settled. It also gives them some time to look at their options. If they are not accepted early decision or early action, they still have time to apply to other colleges or universities. Some of the drawbacks are that it can definitely put pressure on students because those early deadlines are so early. Some students I've had that initially thought they were going to apply in this method said, you know what, this is too quick. I feel like I'm pressured to make a decision. I don't feel confident about it. It can also reduce their financial aid opportunities. A lot of private and out-of-state schools, as you may have seen already, are quite expensive. And if they're applying early decision, it doesn't give them time to compare financial aid offers. If they're early decision and they get in, that tells the college or university that they're willing to go. So it doesn't give them that time to compare. We mentioned still having time to complete other applications, but if students are being notified by December 15th, if they're planning to apply to other private colleges, universities, we mentioned those deadlines generally are in January through early February. So if they haven't started those applications yet, it can, really accelerate that timeline over the break to make sure that those things are done. If your students are considering it, it can be a great option. I've had students that do it. We're happy to talk with them about it, their individual situation. We don't want them to feel pressure. We just want them to know what all of their options are as they go through this process. I won't read these prompts to you, but the nice thing sometimes about college admissions is that a lot of the application prompts can be relatively similar. They're trying to get context about who a student is, what they've done over 4 years that they just cannot see from looking at transcripts and grades alone. You know your students best. You've seen all the things they've done over the last 4 years. There is no way a transcript can accurately capture all of that. So these common essay prompts are across the board for the Common App for all schools. So a lot of students are working on these, or they've been kind of brainstorming. A lot of English classes have been working on these to give students a jump on it. The Common App also puts together a worksheet that gives students some ideas to think about beyond just the prompts. How they might think back over their 4 years of time, how they can show growth over time or an obstacle or challenge that they overcame. So it gives them ideas to talk about. I talk with students all the time about these. Sometimes it's hard to get the words down onto paper right away. So having a discussion about it, writing down some bullet points or some, memories of different events or things that they've done can really help. And I mentioned those supplemental questions. So as students add their colleges and universities that they're applying to, some will have a supplemental question specific to their college or university. Those are also required, and they give the students a chance to really showcase interest specifically in that school. Why are you choosing this campus? What is it that you are looking forward to doing at that college or university? If your student is considering going out of state, I know sometimes that can be a big change and a big move, especially looking at what we call sticker shock, which can be the price of out-of-state tuition. The Western Undergraduate Exchange, or WUI for short, is a program where students can have reduced tuition costs for going to out-of-state schools. So it's an agreement among, there's over 160 public colleges and universities that are a part of this program. For students who meet requirements, they pay no more than 150% of in-state tuition. So you'll see some numbers here that can really kind of put that into perspective. For example, if a student attends Colorado State University, as a resident, they'd pay about $12,000. As a non-resident, they'd pay about $27,000. Under WUI tuition with this exchange, it's about $18,000. Still a hefty amount, but far reduced. Students also still will have the opportunity to apply for financial aid directly through the institution or for federal aid. They can apply for scholarships and grants. There are a lot of institutional scholarships that students can apply for through the WUI program. So on that link there, you'll see the list of colleges and universities that participate in this program. As students are doing their research, keeping this in mind so that they can make those out-of-state tuition a little bit more bearable as they're going through the process, this can really help. As students attend these colleges and universities, they need to continue to qualify for them. So that means maintaining their minimum GPA, maintaining their minimum amount of course units that they're taking, but it can greatly reduce the amount that students have to pay as an out-of-state student. We've talked about Naviance over the last couple of years, and now that we are approaching senior year, this is the last year, but this is one of my favorite ways to use Naviance because I get to write about my students. So we'll talk about ways that students will use it here in the senior year. One of them is for teacher recommendations. So we ask students in their Naviance account, as they are doing their research, deciding what schools to apply to, any of the colleges that they may have been thinking about over the last couple of years, if they are for sure that they're going to be applying this school year, they'll move them into the colleges I'm applying to section of their Naviance account. This specifically for Naviance is how we submit our information for Common Application schools. Our school links Naviance and Common App together so that students will need to still create their Common App account, but their teachers and their counselor will submit their information through Naviance for them, and I'll show you how to do that. So to match the Common App account, it is generally pretty easy. Students are entering the email address that they use to create their Common App account and their birth date. That way, any colleges they add to their Common App account, I will be able to see in their Naviance account, or their teachers automatically will get their letters of recommendation sent. I know that students are still trying to finalize those things, but as they make any updates, even if they remove schools, we'll be able to see that as well. Teachers, and myself included as a counselor, are not able to send anything for a student until these accounts are matched. The good news is that you see it here in red. If it's not matched, it's very easy for me to tell. I've already talked to a couple of students just to make sure that they do it. It's a quick process that we can help them with, but that way it makes sure that we're able to submit on their behalf. As we write letters of recommendation, we ask students to complete what is called a brag sheet. And for some students, this can be difficult to do, to brag about themselves and all the amazing things that they have done over the last 4 years. In a student's Naviance account, they will be able to access the brag sheet specifically for seniors. They may have already started to work on this. If not, this is the perfect time to do so. The brag sheet is used by teachers and counselors a little bit differently. So teachers are really focusing on what students have done in the classroom, how they've been a leader in the classroom, how they've shown growth over time. Maybe they overcame an obstacle, they took on a special project specifically in their subject area in the classroom. Counselors are doing a more holistic approach over 4 years of high school. So we're talking about students as members of our school community, what they've done throughout their 4 years, maybe leadership positions that they've held or challenges that they've overcome. We're looking really globally for them as a student throughout their 4 years. For students, filling out the brag sheet can really help them with their personal statements and essays that they may be completing. Because as I mentioned before, a lot of the prompts tend to be fairly similar or similar enough that they can use information from their brag sheet directly into a college application. So you'll see this image here it looks like it's scrolling forever. There are a lot of questions on here, but they are very close to what they'll see in their college applications. And so doing some of this brainstorming here gives them something to start with if they haven't done those college essays yet. So we ask students to really take their time answering these questions. They have a very large word limit. It does not have to be a huge essay, but we want to give students the room to share with us what they'd like to share. As they're talking about maybe sports or clubs or activities that they've done at school, we really want to see how much time they've been spending on it, any leadership activities or positions that they may have had, projects that they took on, so that we can talk about those things. I mentioned the context and how important that is for schools, including how long they've been playing a sport, how long they've been in a certain club, or any leadership positions, initiatives that they maybe took on, training other students. Those are all things that we want to highlight. We want to see specific examples. So we know our students really well. We always learn new things about them through the brag sheet. So if a student is having a teacher from a specific class write a letter for them, if they can help jog that teacher's memory about maybe an essay that they wrote in English class or a presentation that they did for a science class, helping to remind the teacher about that. Maybe they can go back and look at some of the work that they've done. It really helps us to be as specific as we possibly can. We want your student's letter to look nothing like any other student's letter. It could only be unique to their student. And it's showing their growth over time, over 4 years of high school. Sometimes students feel a lot of pressure in the senior year and they say, I don't know if I have enough or if it's good enough. One of the biggest things that colleges look at is growth over time. Letters of recommendation are a great way to show that in the process. So I mentioned kind of briefly what the brag sheet is for. The more time that students take to answer these questions, the better letter we can write. That really is true. I've had students that will write a couple sentences or maybe a couple words here and there, and I usually will call them in and say, hey, can you help me fill in the gaps here or tell me more about this? And I'm writing notes and things that I know I want to put in that letter of recommendation. Because these letters are required for so many things like private schools, scholarships, internships, I will send them anywhere for a student. I've written a letter of recommendation for a college application that I then very easily repurposed and sent off to multiple scholarship applications. We're happy to do that. As long as we have enough time, we want to write the best letter that we can. We do not want to rush these things. So here's kind of a deeper dive into what some of the questions are. This really takes some thought on the student's part. Sometimes it's hard to think about what have they been doing over the last 4 years? Who was I in the freshman year? How did I get involved? What are some things that I tried out? I've had students that talk about, grades that they earned that were not their best. It wasn't what they wanted to see, because the college is going to see it. They'll see it on the transcript, but they want to know, what did you do next? What was your next step? How did you overcome it? Or, I've had students that have tried a club or activity and said, this really wasn't for me. This wasn't the best fit. It helped them to find what was the best fit. So there's no right or wrong way to approach high school. Students have kind of winding paths of things that they do throughout their time with us. We want to make sure that we capture that. So we mentioned for letters of recommendation, UC and CSU schools do not require or even accept letters of recommendation as part of the initial application. There may be, after that application period, some UC schools will reach out to a student directly and offer them the option to submit a letter of recommendation. I've seen Berkeley do that, UCLA I've seen do that. If students are given that option, take advantage of it. Sometimes they're looking for a little bit more context. If things on an application that, they're looking for a little more specificity, they'll reach out to a student and say, hey, we would love to give you the opportunity to submit up to 2 letters for us. Take that opportunity, submit everything that you can. It can only help you. So I mentioned most schools will require at least one, but that number can vary. So it is really important to keep track of it because if you don't submit the up to the required amount, it can disqualify your application. So we ask seniors to complete their brag sheet ahead of time before they request letters. But if that happens, and it happens every year, if I request for a letter, that's usually one of the first questions that I ask, is your brag sheet done? And if not, let me help you. We got to get in there. Let's start working on it. We recommend that students ask teachers that know them fairly well, and that they've had classes with recently, within the last in junior year or even into the sophomore year. We want teachers that have seen students recently and that know them really well. So if if your student is having trouble thinking of who to ask, or if they ask their teacher and they say, you know what, I'm really not sure I can write a great letter for you, think about it again. Think about a teacher that knows you. Maybe they were also your coach. We have a lot of teachers that were coaches as well. We ask for at least 2 weeks notice to write letters, which is why we ask that Friday, November 22nd, that Friday before Thanksgiving break. We know they're going to be excited to go. They deserve it. We ask students to request letters from us by that date to give us enough time. Every year I have a student that will ask me during the winter break, will say, Miss Guys, my application's due on January 1st. I need you to write a letter for me. I don't want to rush this process. We take a really long time to do it. We want to make sure that it's done right to showcase all the things that your students are doing. So asking ahead of time gives us time to write the best letter that we can on behalf of your student. You'll see here how to do it. They'll log into their Naviance account. When they request letters from teachers, they will only see their teachers available in the list. They will not see counselors available to select letters of recommendation. I mentioned towards the beginning that for colleges that require letters of recommendation, if they have a limit in the number that they accept, that only applies to teachers. Counselors can submit letters of recommendation that do not count against that total. Our information is submitted separately. So for any students that want a letter of recommendation from me, I ask them to just let me know directly. They can email, come see me, so that I know.